It's a warm welcome to this exclusive interview where we get to have a chat with the chairman of the National Social Security Authority, NSSA. Today we have the unique opportunity to gain valuable insights into the important role that NSSA plays in safeguarding the welfare and future of our nation's workforce. Help me to welcome Dr. Emmanuel Anesu Fundira, who is the chairman of NSSA. Dr. Fundira, welcome to the program.
Thank you very much.
It's now almost a year since you were appointed into this role. How has been the journey so far?
Well, the journey has been full of surprises. Some of them very pleasant and some very unpleasant, but not unusual. I must say it's an experience which is something which is enviable, and it's a challenge which I think I'm fit for the bill in terms of being able to deal with the various issues which are presently sitting at NSSA.
What would you consider as your major achievements so far as the NSSA board chair?
Well, first of all, when I got into the position, it was at the end of a concluded forensic audit, which had been ordered by the authorities, by the government of Zimbabwe, to look at some of the issues where allegations were made at NSSA, which had been concluded. So mine was purely to go through the report and see how best I can assist the organization in terms of addressing those particular issues. And that was the first task. And I must say, and happy to say and report today, that we have successfully managed to implement all those issues raised in the forensic audit, which included separation with senior executives, which were alleged to have been involved in certain malpractices, as proven by the report, and also addressing some of the issues where there had been gaps on the management of the fund itself, where certain practices were beyond reproach, and we were seized with those responsibilities of making sure that all those issues were addressed, and that really happened and successfully implemented.
Let's talk about some of the challenges you've encountered to date.
Well, I mean, obviously, when you're talking about separation with senior people in an organization, it's not an easy task. It's a task where you really have to use a lot of negotiating skills to negotiate and find a common position where you end up having to separate ways amicably in a way without necessarily disturbing. Because my view and my role when I came to NSSA was to bring in stability in the organization and also ensure that we conduct ourselves in such a fashion that we are measured correctly by the market, conducting our investments in a prudential way so that we can exercise due and fiduciary responsibility expected of any director.
Dr. Fundira, there have been murmurings of malpractices in NSSA that possibly have led to low staff morale, and generally stakeholders are unhappy in the market about this. How are you addressing such issues?
Well, first of all, we have had a lot of interaction, both with our social partners, to get them to understand what we need to do together. This is not a single man's approach. It's a responsibility both for the board and management to come together. We are all seized with some of these issues and all agree that NSSA is not in the right space. We would like to take NSSA out of that space, which is where they've been incorrectly measured, and for good reasons. Some of the issues, like I said, we've managed to address them through the forensic audit, which has been concluded. But it doesn't stop there. We also really have to carry out a cultural dipstick and address the cultural malfeasance, malpractices, which are currently present in NSSA, which I think are so well entrenched to a point where you really need to bring in a new culture of new practice of doing things and making sure that people can exercise their professional minds in conducting their responsibilities going forward.
Do you foresee NSSA being an employer of choice based on these current challenges being experienced?
Yes, of course. Can I tell you something? At the moment, you'll be very surprised. NSSA is a very competitive employer. And you'll be surprised when you talk to NASA, even at a lower and management level, we've got dedicated staff, people who are really conducting themselves well and providing a good service to our clients. What has been happening at NASA is some pockets of individuals who really instilled a certain personal culture into the organization, which is what we are dealing with. And we are saying, to a large extent, it's an organization which is ready to be addressed, and some of these issues, we can clean up the organization and make sure we can move forward. We are currently in the process of recruiting a general manager, a CEO for the organization, and that in itself is a big statement. By so doing, it means we have somebody with executive powers who can quickly address some of these issues and help the board, with the support of the board and our principals, to move NASA forward to greater heights.
On the investment front, in your view, is NASA operating optimally?
Not really. I would say no, for the simple reason that when I arrived at NASA, we have what we call the investment contribution ratios in terms of our capital disbursements. That has been extremely low. We're probably looking at about 10%, which is really, if you look at global standards, is very, very low. We are looking at NASA having an investment contribution ratio of at least around 40%. So we're accelerating our investment strategies and making sure that we can work our investments, sweat our assets to an extent that they can contribute significantly towards the income we are generating at NASA, and ensure that we can sustainably provide a livable pension benefit to our stakeholders.
When do you see that happening? Maybe.
Well, look, we have already started. NASA, compared to other pension funds, whom I cannot mention, are doing extremely well in terms of providing. It's a mega pension benefit which is growing, but we are saying, based on the ILO standards, we are supposed to at least get to levels of $60 per month, which I think, in my own personal view and that of the board, is still very low. We have already attained that. We're already giving our pension benefits up to $60 a month. But surely our ideal as a board is to work on a process where we can improve that contribution ratio or payment benefit to around $100. That would be closer to what is obtaining elsewhere in countries like Botswana, where in Botswana, a pensioner is guaranteed the equivalent of $100 every month. And that is, in a way, addresses some of the problems which our pensioners are getting at the moment. It's not necessarily sufficient, but for
you
someone...
You read my face.
Yeah, I read your face. I read your face. But it's something better. $100 is more meaningful than 60. So we are trying as much as possible to see whether we can build our pensionable incomes to levels which are reasonable and which can give the pensioner a livable benefit.
Government, the National Development Strategy 1 speaks to an upper middle income economy by the year 2030. Are we on the same route as NASA?
Well, I mean, I think to a very large extent, we are currently working with an organization where we are trying to build even the various pillars which can prepare all of us towards something which is very inevitable, which is pensionable age. And quite truly so, government is committed through NDS1, like you said, in terms of creating a middle income economy by 2030. We are part of that journey. And that journey is expressed in itself, like I described to you, in us also addressing the issues in terms of what benefits we are building towards giving those people who have contributed honestly in terms of their own personal savings, which should give them some form of livable benefit when they retire. But in doing so, we are also coming up with a new strategy. We want to prepare people 3 years before they retire, equipping them with the necessary tools so that they don't get surprised when they come to retirement age. Build them to ensure that they are upskilled to do things for themselves, which are profitable, which can give them, generate sufficient income, which can augment the pension benefits which they have at retirement age. So that training process is one of the tools which we would like to do, which would contribute directly in terms of also making sure that come 2030, every pensioner will actually also be part and parcel of the journey of achieving or contributing or being part of the middle income economy.
And finally, Dr. Fundira, how do you envision NSSA under your chairmanship? How do you want it to be?
Okay, I see NSSA as, before I leave NSSA, which is probably not going to be very soon, but the main objective of my board and my principles make sure that, like I said at the beginning, to create stability at NSSA, so that NSSA can only be known for good things. At the moment, NSSA is known for the wrong things, and that's my responsibility and the board and that of management to ensure that we can address that perception which is currently very present in the economy. How do you do that? We do that by making sure that we engage our social partners, making them understand and help each other, addressing the issues and being very honest and practicing a lot of fiduciary responsibilities on part of managing that fund, making sure that our investments are prudentially managed and that they can give a good return. These are monies which belongs to me and you who are contributing to NSSA as we are working. And by the end of the day, it's a form of savings. And when you want, surely your expectation after you put your money into a savings bank, like what NSSA is that you want to be able to get benefit out of that savings at the end of the period. So I'd like to see a NSSA which people can look at and say, we have a dependable fund manager at NSSA who can guarantee us a sustainable living wage upon retirement. How is that?
Perfect. Very soon we'll be also retiring, and would want to live an older life that's decent and makes sense.
Yes, and also if you think of it, that's only one aspect of NSSA. NSSA also looks after the occupational health issues, OSH, which really people who are at work, some people get injured before they even get into retirement age, which is part and parcel of what NSSA does. We have a responsibility as NSSA to make sure that we provide the services of people who have been inflicted by forms of injury, where they're incapacitated and they got some form of invalidity, which makes them fail to perform their duties. NSSA has got provisions. We've got different facilities, occupational homes, where we train our people, upskill them, give them new skills and training, and making sure that they can also have some form of sustenance moving forward, which is a good thing.
Yes, it's a great thing. Dr. Fundira, thank you so much for your time.
Yeah,
I was speaking there to Dr. Emmanuel Anesu Fundira, who is the chairman of the National Social Security Authority, NSSA. Of course, this was an exclusive interview to get insights on his tenure as chairman. Thank you for watching. Goodbye.